right, this is the show, Drugs.God.Music, where we talk about drugs, especially psychedelics, God, religion, philosophy, spirituality, and music. We're both musicians. I even occasionally add real-time music, and that's what we do here.
That is what we do.
You want to say anything, Jeremy?
Oh, we cut up for a bit. No, I think that's it. Yeah, Chris Mandel, and I'm Jeremy Kern. And yeah, so we just kind of have topics. Sometimes we just kind of chat. And we always chat. And then we decided one day we should publicize our chats. So here we are.
And let's see here. That is pretty much it. So we were already talking about this stuff, so we decided to turn it into a show. Let's see. Oh, and today's topic, loosely, we do not stick to topic well because it's so informal, but we are going to talk about psychedelic community and, religious community in general and whatever, community in general. And there are reasons for that, but there have been recent both of our lives are evolving in community-oriented ways right now in pretty major ways. So that is what's on both of our minds. So it seemed like a good topic for the day.
And I wanted to see, you might weave in that we talk a lot about psychedelic use as a personal kind of growth medium, but I'd like to see if we can consider how psychedelic use might be helpful for the world at large, because we're better people, because, who knows, but, is there a general betterment to be had, right? In cultures that use shamans, the shaman often takes a psychedelic medicine in order to negotiate healing for the patient with whatever spirits they're working with. So that's a very direct kind of way of bettering the world. So yeah, get that. All right. Well,
that was brilliant.
Community and world betterment, or for lack of a better term. Ready, go.
Ready, go. Let's see.
Let's do a check-in, I guess.
All right. Well, why don't we just start out with the concrete stuff? How about you just tell everybody about Trillium?
Well, I'm still in a process.
Yeah, but it's like you've got this.
What?
Yes, you're still in process, but major things have happened.
Oh, well, we got an offer accepted. That was pretty major. I suppose the biggest things are get an offer accepted. Well, figure out if we can fund it. Then get an offer accepted. Then generally freak out. Then sell a house, which we have yet to do, and get a loan, which I think we have done. And then after that, if all goes well, then we'll close on it and then figure out what to do with this retreat center we just bought. We have some ideas, but I don't suppose we have well, I don't know. That's Kate's job today. She's figuring it out.
Could you just give us the 1-minute version of, how about you give here's your challenge, 1-minute version of what Trillium is and a 1-minute version of the basic things that you're thinking about doing with it. And we'll just assume that you get it, because you did get an offer accepted, which is a big deal.
Yeah, no, that's a big deal. I didn't. Let's see. Yeah, so Trillium, if anyone out there has ever bought or has or is part of running a retreat center, please comment with your contact information and I'll be contacting you. So Trillium is a retreat center. It's 80 acres and like 14 buildings, and it's been lots of things over the years, but mostly an intentional community / wilderness education center. And we're crazy, so we decided we wanted to buy it because we love it. And so that's what it is. And well, what we're gonna do, so a lot of it's lifestyle, you know, to live in nature, to live by a river, to live by ponds, to not live in town anymore, to live in community, to be able to rent, to make money, you know, by renting places for people to live, and short-term and long-term, and doing classes and all that kind of stuff. So Kate and I are both, you know, I don't know, self-development people. So there's lots of kind of topics we would teach.
Yeah, could you give an example of one you could imagine teaching and one she could end up teaching?
Sure. You know, Kate likes to teach classes a lot about cultivating one's vision, tapping into one's creativity. I tend to like teaching about working with consciousness and nature. So there's that. And then group events or workshops on the similar topics. Of course, if anyone lives in community, you know that just living together is a lot of just what you do. It's, you know, if you're at work 8 hours a day and sleeping for 8, and the other 8 is just being at home with your people or by yourself or going out or whatever. So that's kind of what a lot of the daily stuff might look like. Yeah, I don't know totally what's going to happen. The magnitude of the endeavor feels big enough as to imply that while we might have plans, it's unsure truly what's going to take place. But that's why we think we're a good fit for the place. We've both lived rurally. I do a fair amount of construction, so I think I'd be able to keep the place in good working order. That's kind of what it is. So yeah, we're in the midst of that process, which is one kind of big endeavor after the next. And if we get it done in time, then I guess we'll get it. It's like a prize. And if we don't get it done in time, then I guess we won't get it. I don't know. We'll see. So yeah, that's a lot of what I'm doing right now. I suppose more pertinent, or specifically pertinent to this call, is I tend to approach practical questions both from a practical as well as an impractical or, you know, philosophical viewpoint. So I'm considering, you know, what this whole transition means, what it means to sell a co-op house that I ran for a lot of years, what it means to leave Colorado after 20 years when I came here with specific goals and intentions, what it means to be leaving and going back to the West Coast where I'm from with a partner and kids. So I suppose that's what I fill my time with when I don't know how to make practical steps on selling the house. I just end up thinking a lot about metaphysics. So hopefully it helps.
Yeah.
Maybe it won't. I don't know.
Well, it seems like for the two of you, they've been going through this for a year, preparing to buy this stuff, contemplating it, and contemplating the implications of buying an 80-acre retreat. How many buildings? Like 20 buildings?
No, I think there's 14 usable buildings. But that's a lot. It's a lot of roofs.
And so it becomes, a lot of financial, obviously. You know, a lot, you don't have any choice. You have to think a lot about finances, but then you guys are both naturally tuned to thinking about these things a lot in terms of like spiritually and emotionally, right?
Yeah.
And also as in your relationship, the two of you. And so it ends up being a lot of the discourse, is what I'm saying.
Oh, about what again?
What I mean is what you guys have been doing for the last year
Oh,
isn't
yes,
really
yes,
thinking
yes.
about finances. It's about thinking
Yeah.
about the deeper implications in your lives
Yeah.
or in the world of your work at this property.
Yeah, right. I guess like when you're like us, or I guess I put you in the same category, but when you create your life from the inside out, right, as opposed to like I'm gonna go get a master's in business and then get a big job and then create my life. That's what I would call kind of outside in. When you do it the reverse, and you start with meaning and how something feels, and then kind of it's a different kind of navigation. But yeah, that's been a lot of our life contemplation, and two of our kids are in Oregon, and of course Chris is in Oregon, and we both love Oregon, so living in Oregon I think is going to happen regardless. But yeah, doing something as big as Trillium, which involves my no longer doing my current career, selling a house, leaving Colorado, putting a lot of our money in. It's you're really trying to figure out if this thing is worth all of this basically destabilization of what we have going on, and if we can then grow something there that becomes the new stability. Because we're both like in or around 50s, and at some point you like the material stuff to kind of just be handled, even if you're still working, so you can I don't know, get onto other stuff. So it's there's some risks and some vulnerability in that, hence the deep contemplation or whatnot. Yeah.
So regarding psychedelic culture, even if the answer is no, you could say why. But do you imagine there being, journeys or something on this property someday?
Yeah, I guess, well, yeah, yes is the short answer. I mean, I'm living there and I'm me, so, that's implied. And then, if it's a big group, I don't totally know yet. I'm not, at this point, I'm barely, let's see. I've been doing a music career, but I'd like to switch and start doing more coaching and teaching and psychedelic work and consciousness work and all that kind of thing. But I'm not really to that point yet. So to imagine what I might be doing there, in the context of a big group is hard to totally imagine. Chris and I have done stuff, and I've led men's groups and whatnot, but so yeah, I would say the goal is for Trillium, and actually what kind of the magic of it is Trillium is so big and multifaceted, it needs every different aspect of who Kate and I are, my partner Kate, which means that we have to be all of us for the success of the place, and we get to be all of us, meaning that living there is now meaningful. So yeah, I would think so. I don't know that we're necessarily aiming to try to rent it out to other groups right away, or maybe ever, but having a hand personally in everything that happens there. But it's I would say the whole nature of leaving a town and driving 45 minutes into the woods in order to live at a retreat center for any length of time is the same kind of energy you could consider of taking a psychedelic or being creative, or you're aligning yourself with something that's not practical materialism. You're aligning yourself with whatever you feel to be a deeper nature of things, not stuff you have to do, not culture, but like really the nature of things, whether that's nature itself as a living organism, or the nature of love, or the nature of creativity, or being creative, or just having a human experience. So that's really what Trillium is about, is focusing on the human experience outside. I mean, where do you draw the line? But outside certainly a socioeconomic pressure matrix that can define a lot of our lives. But if you're someone who goes camping or fishing or hiking or does anything that, or as an artist, then when you're in that space, it's really not about human survival. It's about human creativity and humanity in a different way. So that's really our focus. And yeah, I think psychedelics are fully part of that.
Yeah.
I guess to Kate's point, we don't totally have a detailed business plan, but we've been doing this kind of stuff for so long that it's kind of implied that of what we're going to do, and kind of assume it'll work out. But she's more of a business person than I am, I think. So yeah, that's it. And I guess to the other point of making the world a better place, that's kind of what we're doing, right? We want to go to Trillium for our own experience, right? I want to smoke pot for my own experience or whatever. But I also, it was about maybe 3 years ago, I think, Chris and I did a trip. We do trips once or twice a year. And we didn't even smoke weed for most of it. And it was kind of this transition point. Chris was leaving Colorado to move back to Oregon. And we talked a lot about how we thought our use of drugs was changing, because while early on, as is typical, we were doing a lot of personal exploration and healing and spiritual growth. But now we feel like we kind of did that, and we wanted to contemplate how our use of substances might benefit others somehow, whether it's healing, right, like in a shamanic context, or it's teaching, where we're both high but we're focusing on the other person's growth, or using a substance and then coming up with a bunch of creative ideas, or specifically working on compassion or generosity, something that contributes, which I would make the argument ultimately is going to make for a stronger aspect of awakening in psychedelic use. Any content you bring, but certainly how to contribute to society is a pretty big one. And I don't know, I guess once you work through a lot of your stuff, then if you keep wanting to be creative, then that's, even as an artist, even if you're just a painter, musician, you got to interface with society somehow. So, what's the value of that? What are you trying to contribute? And it's what Trillium is, right? It's kind of the ultimate high, but we also get to get everyone else high, because the land's doing most of the work. It's just, the land's awesome, so you just get to be there.
I like that. The land is doing most of the work.
Yeah.
It already, that's actually a good analogy to a mistake people often make with psychedelics, I think. Facilitators, there's this pressure, can be a pressure of, I got to do this and I got to do that, and I have to bring, I have to earn my paycheck if you're getting paid, right? And so there's this idea It's weird. It's like the psychedelics are just a tool. It's ultimately the person doing the work, but you also don't want to overthink. Like, you don't want to have to overthink how much work you as a facilitator or even as a person tripping have to do, because a lot of it actually is just take the medicine and it's magical.
Yeah, you were a good voice for that during our psychedelic jams. We had a kind of a short-lived business attempt at doing these psychedelic music jams, which is a big part of both of our history together. And yeah, it's funny because, and I think you find this a lot in arenas of consciousness. Like, to get into a flow state, you can't try hard, but you have to be really present, but really
That's a good way to put it.
Right? Or tantra talk. I mean, it's kind of the state of human consciousness, the highest state. If you're totally present and alert, but totally like relaxed and surrendered, you get this, both sides of the brain, I think is what it is, enter this optimal zone, and then you can go into these states of consciousness. But yeah, you can't make it too much about you and your agenda and at the very least, you have to be responding to a larger point of focus, which is somebody else's needs or the needs of a community, or there's something guiding, something guiding you. Well, in that, if you're a lecturer, then I don't know, it's different. But in this case, it's something guiding you. So yeah, that's the kind of metaphysical stuff. Because I don't know, in my mind, I'm not sure a sale would work if our intentions for the place are really out of alignment with what it is. So I'm trying to ascertain what's the best way of being, such that we can go be that way at Trillium, because Trillium requires us to be that way, because that's how it works, right? If we were buying a gas station or a laundromat, it would be a different whole thing. But we're not. Well, we haven't bought it yet, but anyway. So, yeah.
All right. So what we alluded to in the beginning, that a lot's going on for me too. So I was involved. I already pretty much devote all the time I have to either my practice personally, working with people one-on-one sometimes, but a lot of it is more in community through this channel, which has a little community of folks who follow it, or also locally. And I was part of a mushroom church for about a year in Eugene, Oregon. And there's not a lot of these babies. It's a pretty special thing, really. There's a handful of mushroom churches around the country and around the world, but I mean, like a handful. And this one would have as many as 100 people show up. So it was a pretty big deal. Oh, let's see. I don't think I'm hitting correct. There we go. That's a little better. But unfortunately it broke up a few weeks ago, and now in the last 4 weeks, there's these efforts for the community without the leader, who he left for his own reasons, but everything was kind of like he was doing everything. So there's these efforts to bring this community of folks that know one another and that trip to one another and that rely on one another back together in a completely different way, a more decentralized way. But in the beginning, there's a lot of organization to do, and so I'm heavily involved in that. It just makes sense, since I'm already heavily involved in cultivating one way or another psychedelic community. So I jumped in and took on a lot of early responsibility. Let's say that. So it's an exciting time, but I'm also busy as fuck.
Yeah, you are. I'm curious for you to share how if you want, you can share your background. why are you a good fit for a psychedelic church? It's a lot of different pieces, and being in a leader role. But also, what's your kind of what's your style? What's your leadership style? And do you think that's how do you think that's effective for the whole thing?
Okay, well, what he's alluding to is kind of like a destiny thing, to tell you the truth, because it really does feel like I've been prepared for the work that I do right now for a long. Been preparing with the kitty biting me. She has a habit of biting those who she loves. Let's see. Well, I've got I've been involved in spirituality since I was 12, and let's see here. Psychedelics since I was 17, so I was pretty early on to both of those things. Although taking psychedelics really seriously and studying it rigorously has only been the last, 6 or 7 years?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And it's really ramped up, I think, for both of us recently, where we realized that it was like a really spiritual as well as intellectual endeavor that you can, and the rabbit hole just goes as deep as you want to take it, because there's so many substances and there's so many different ways of using these substances. There's also sometimes so many ways of fucking up while using these substances. So, and also there's the history and culture behind each one. Even newer substances like LSD, or even MDMA, which is 50 years old or something, actually has a rich culture surrounding it.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. To finish that, I've got. Let's see. I worked for a church. I've worked for churches a couple of times, including being a youth minister for 5 years, and I've got a degree in religion and stuff. And I've also been a political organizer. So that
you're unique, though. Too. I mean, what you're not saying is you grew up religious and you grew into your own relationship with Catholicism or Christianity at different times, and then, realized that ultimately it's too small. I mean, or you keep telling the story, but you actually are a legitimate church goer, and then you found your way to psychedelics, which can be kind of unusual.
Yeah, although they overlapped. I was never a teetotaler, and I was never against drugs. Even in high school, I smoked weed. In fact, I was thinking about my life. I just had a birthday, and I was thinking back on my life and realizing that where I am right now makes so much sense, given my life story. Like the idea that you could party and be kind of wild and even smoke weed or drink, but also be a devout, really into spirituality, that strikes people. A lot of people think of that as contradictory, and for me, it just never did. From day one, the idea that you should be both of those things because they both have value, even when I was 16, that was my path.
Yeah, totally.
And I've never really veered from that. And I have been part of communities that were really against drugs, both as a Catholic and then later on when I got into Buddhist meditation, they're really against drugs too, but that's not my bag. In both cases, it always made sense to me just to take the good part of those traditions, and the part that doesn't work for you, you just don't participate in that. And all of the conservative attitudes just never made any sense to me at all.
Yeah, that's a pretty I want to say extreme statement you just made when you sign up for an institution, especially one like religion, where I don't know, I would argue that part of the reason you're doing it in the first place is you haven't answered your own questions because they're really, really hard questions. What's God? How does the universe exist? But they have answers. But in your case, you took some, and I suppose everybody does it at some level. You took some and you kind of rejected others, and it sounds like, you were ultimately more in service of your own path, and then using parts of different things.
Yeah, I suppose so. But also morality. I do take morality seriously, and the idea that like getting high is it dangerous? Maybe. Does it lead to bad behaviors? It can, sure. Like especially alcohol, right? Lots of people make mistakes on that. But that doesn't mean that the behavior itself is like inherently bad. It just doesn't add up. When I was a little kid, actually, I mean like early elementary school, I used the same logic towards profanity.
Oh, awesome.
And so I cared about like, I mean, I'm still going back to when I was like 8 or 9, that I probably used so much profanity, it's ridiculous. I still do, but less more than I think. Less perhaps than back then. Believe it or not. But it just like the idea that some words were like bad to say, it seems so obviously that's not that way that I just never bought into it.
Right, how you use them.
Yeah, you could
Or
say
what?
that.
I mean, you look at anything. I mean, rules exist because a rule maker, 1 or 100 people or whatever in a government organization somewhere, can't work one-on-one with people, and people aren't always driven to self-govern. So a rule is a rule. It's not very specific. Can you run a red light if there's no cars anywhere in sight? Well, of course, there's no meaning. The light has no meaning except to keep cars safe from each other. But that's so yeah, that would be my kind of way of phrasing what you're saying.
Yeah, it's interesting. Yeah, what we call ethics or morality is always in relationship. Well, except sometimes you might apply it to just one person. Like if you're really disrespecting yourself, but then, I don't know, it gets a little tricky, Like is destroying yourself with drugs immoral? Even if you don't have any friends, that it doesn't affect anybody. It's kind of hard to say.
Yeah, it's gonna affect somebody probably. I mean, we're all interdependent, which I suppose it could be said that the whole foundation of suffering at any level or of any kind of suffering is this notion that we're actually separate or alone, which, it depends on the dimension you're talking. It could be social, it could be cosmic, but the answer is always you're not. And when you realize that, you feel good and you're in some kind of, state of experience that doesn't require manipulation because it's already aligned with the truth. It feels good for that reason. So you don't need to try to change it, which I guess is the other kind of question we've talked a lot about. Are drugs being taken because you want to feel something different from what you're feeling, or you want to access something that you don't know how to access otherwise, or that it's, just, well, I suppose the second one would be the devil's advocate way of saying it's expanding you, and so it's a tool for growth. And when you're sober, you're already basically happy and well-adjusted and creative. You're just using it as this kind of amplifier. So maybe that would be the third one, right? The middle one is you can't get there without it, but it's a tool. And then the latter one is ideally it's magnifying something that you can do already to some degree. But I would think that taking drugs to change how you feel implies that you hold a belief that's making you feel bad. So that you kind of get this like feedback loop.
Yeah, although I've seen this argument, for, that is can be twisted into the drugs are bad sort of argument. Is, well, what is it about normal life that that is so bad, right? Like you must have a psychological issue, right? But here's the, if you are eating food because you're hungry, does that mean that you should have just gotten over your hunger?
Yeah, totally agree. Right. I mean, and I'll add that people for whom drugs don't have value will always focus on the drug itself. as opposed to the experience the drug is enabling you to have.
That's true.
And that's usually a sign that somebody's not really going to. The conversation's not going to work because, if it's, well, we could say if you're depressed and ketamine, alleviates your depression, but at some point you have to face your own stuff. At some point you have to learn how to feel what you're feeling that is not meant to be there, and how to discern the difference, right?
Right.
Hunger is suffering that needs food, but you could also be hungry because you're bored or you're sad. So how do you know the difference? That's kind of where a lot of psychology and I know self-knowledge or whatever comes in, which drugs can be great. They can give you a new mind for a few hours to think about things differently.
Yeah, and that is one thing is, people might use psychedelics inappropriately, and maybe it is not giving them the solutions that they thought that they were going to get, right?
That's a good way to put it, yeah.
Possible, but again, you don't take ketamine to hide from your problems. You take ketamine to dive into your problems and fix them from the inside. And so,
but your whole body is numb, so you don't really feel them.
Well, is ketamine a bad? Well, I'll just put it this way. Do you disagree with me?
No. I don't. I don't disagree. No, I do. I'm always diving into my stuff. So it doesn't matter if I'm sober or not. But you can use. You could use ketamine and not do that. But if you're if you're on this path of self-awakening or healing or whatever you want to call it, then if you take the ketamine in order for that purpose, it's really going to help. It's going to help you feel things and understand things, and your mind will be like, oh, I don't have to feel that way, or oh, that's what happened. Now I have information instead of emotional reaction. That tends to seem like one of the arrival points of healing, is you have information that explains why you feel that way, especially early trauma where you may not have memories. You're just angry at the world or angry at men or whatever.
Yeah. I would say as far as the insight thing goes,
I do agree.
For me, that is more acid and mushroom, tryptamines, I guess. Whereas the ketamine is kind of more energy work and less cognitive for me. They overlap, don't get me wrong.
Yeah. I don't know, Chris, if you saw my text, but I with the help of what my wife now calls Arthur Engelbert, I fed some questions into our new digital brain and our AI brain, and came up with a 10 category list of factors that apply to psychedelics. Is it mental? Is it emotional? Is it grounding or not? And for each psychedelic, I rated each of the 10 factors in order from highest to lowest, which essentially is now a very detailed system that's answering some of these questions we've kind of been talking about in theory, like why would you take acid or mushrooms or MDMA, for a particular purpose. That list doesn't include purposes, but it doesn't. But the 10 characteristics are definitive enough that you could read through them and say, oh, okay. It said MDMA is very grounded, which compared to ketamine, certainly that's like the opposite, right? Ketamine is so emotional and transpersonal in a way that MDMA, unless you take a lot, it's really not that it's not transcendent, I guess is the word.
That's the word. Yeah, you weren't making sense to me there for a second.
Yeah. Yeah,
I
it might
think
be
you said
transpersonal.
ketamine was more interpersonal, and I was like, whoa, 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 dog.
No, ketamine. Yeah, ketamine is transcendent, and yeah, MDMA might be like interpersonal. But anyway, so well, maybe. Sorry, I gotta get away from this train. Maybe next show we can talk about some of that stuff. Maybe I'll have like developed that system a little more. Here, you can talk. I'm gonna mute myself.
Oh, you've got a train. I don't know what I want to talk about if I'm by myself. You know, it's funny. I love talking on video, and I love playing music on video, but I don't always like doing both.
It's going right now.
So I just did a ceremony, psychedelic ceremony this weekend with this new community that I'm working with. And it was a lot of fun. And I was playing music for it. I was playing music kind of like what I'm doing right now. Which, you know, playing for people while tripping is what the whole thing is really meant for, this particular kind of music. But I can't really, I wanted to participate chemically with, you know, my brothers and sisters, but I know from experience that it's very hard for me to play on mushrooms. I mean, I can jam, you know, with other people on mushrooms. But that's because the level of accountability is very small. But trying to like make real serious music where I don't mess up very much basically means I can't be on 2 grams of mushrooms. You got to know these things, you know. I mean, it's, and you just learn about yourself and your musicianship and how you are on different drugs. And I have made several videos where I was on about 2 grams of mushrooms, played music kind of like this by myself. They're on my channel, in fact. And I was like not having fun at all. I was messing up a lot. I was really stressed. I found it difficult to enjoy tripping and really letting go because I had so much just musically to deal with. And then the irony is that both times I went back to the recording afterward and actually liked it. There was one, I think it was the Christmas trip that's still on my channel. I did a like psychedelic live stream trip on this channel back on Christmas, and I was embarrassed at my playing. I thought it had been a complete disaster, and I really felt bad. And then I went back to the recording and was like, wait a minute, the parts that you feel bad about, man, like that was like 2 notes. You played like in 2 hours, you played like 2 or 3 bad notes or out of tune notes, and now you're all tripping about it.
Yeah, that's also what 2 grams of mushrooms will do to your playing. Things make you trip on it, trip about it.
Yeah, right. And so what I ended up doing instead, this is what I was getting to, is I used MDA. I took a kind of medium dose of MDA with a little bit of mushrooms so that I was sort of in the same vibe as everybody else. And it was perfect because the thing is with MDMA, you're like, it's psychedelic, you're definitely high, but you might even have insights and stuff, but it's because it can be very creative and interesting stuff, but it's a lot more functional. The downside is that like MDMA, it's very similar to MDMA. It gives you a little bit of a serotonin, like it takes away your serotonin, and then for a few days afterward, you may be depressed or just kind of tired. And I've been kind of fighting that. Not depression, but just like disengagement for the last couple of days. And it's been hard because the world does not want me to disengage right now. It wants me to show up to work in like multiple areas. And I've been kind of like, guys, can I just stay in bed?
Yeah, there's something ironic about that. Kay and I were talking about that too. I guess I made the point that you have to work for everything, anything that you want, you know, or anything that seems like a big achievement you have to work for, even if it's taking psychedelics and writing religious, ideology, and now you're really busy. Which,
yeah, right. Even good stuff, and that's just it. I've got all this going on right now, especially since getting involved in this new community, this psychedelic community. That is like, this psychedelic community where we just did our first ceremony, and we've got a lot of meetings and stuff. I am looking at my calendar and thinking, I do not have time for everything, but I'm also, everything on it is stuff that I love, like doing karate. I'm about to take an improv class that I'm really excited about, and of course hanging out with my family, and there's also that little jobby thing that matters too. There's nothing that I want to take off. The only thing I take off is sleep.
That's all you take off. Yeah, I've been doing that too.
Well, actually, the other thing is like an actual trip for me, my personal psychedelic practice.
Yeah.
I have not done for a while. I just haven't. It's been I guess only a month since I took DXM. But if I had more time, I would love to do a trip for me, and like just me, But it's like I'm too busy in psychedelic culture to have time to actually do my personal practice.
You need to do a trip with your friend Jeremy.
That sounds like fun too. Yeah. But personal tripping alone is really is really important for my.
Yeah, that's true.
My health, I guess you say.
Yeah. I might be a time thing, also kind of how my day flows. I really haven't done a lot of that. Hard to find. That's what's nice about 2CB. It's short. But I haven't found a good window to do that.
Yeah. Well, you just don't trip by yourself as much as I do. But of course, you're very mindful about how you use weed, and that is sort of, for you, ends up fitting the same category.
Yes. No, you're right. I use weed a fair amount, but it functions differently, right? It doesn't have the same kind of surrender, I guess, that traditional psychedelics have. That anyway, I'm just you've done more of that than I have, so it's always on my mind that it's an experience I need to add in. But yeah, it's I don't know. Something about being busy. I suppose at the end of the day, you have to be busy. Well, maybe in contrast to what happened previously in the church, but or people who are well-intentioned, or even us going to Trillium, right? We can't be a stressed out, tired mess. We have to live at Trillium and really enjoy it, even if we're working hard, which in my mind, the way that comes together is because I'm in a context, literally in the woods, which I love, not in the city, which I very much don't love. In our land with all these houses, which I love renting, building. If I'm living in a world that I believe in, that I value, that I care about, then the work is work, but the energy's flowing. When you do work and you're resisting it because you think it's stupid, or you don't want to, or you hate your boss, you're tired of your job, then it makes it hard. But if you're inspired because, it's in alignment or whatever, then it's a lot easier. So that's kind of my thought of being excited and inspired to do the work. And, if I'm getting up at 3 a.m. to, fuck with flooding and covered in mud, then I might not like that. But it's, at the end of the day, it's in service of that place and what we're doing there, which is totally our choosing. So you figure that too, right? You're like, well, I chose to get myself into this mess because it felt like a calling or destiny. So anything else I do second, anything else I do thereafter has to kind of draw on that truth, especially in difficult moments, to remember, like, well, wait a second. It's a fucking psychedelic church I'm running here. This isn't like, not delivering pizzas, which might be easier, but also probably more tiring.
Oh yeah, well, it's harder to do stuff you don't want to do. Exactly.
Yeah, there you go.
Oh, actually, I was like, trying to prepare emotionally for our show because I'm just so like wrapped up into all of the stuff I'm doing. It's hard to get into it more like, let's just lay back, like, let's be cool and have some fun in the middle of my day. Although the answer, as long as I actually schedule it, is always simple. I only need 10 minutes to smoke a small bowl of salvia. And that's what I did before the show. So in fact, Jeremy came on and it was like, oh, Chris, you seem so laid back, or like, you're in a great place. And I was like, oh, well, yeah, like, you should have seen me 30 minutes ago. But just a small little meditation with salvia is the fast way to deal with it.
Yeah.
And it's weird because I don't always default to it, even though it basically always works. Oh, you can't hear. Can you be more specific? Are you saying my playing you can't hear? What is it? What element can you not hear? Somebody said we've got an audio problem, but I'm not sure
really?
what it is.
No.
All right, somebody else said they do hear, so I don't know. We'll find out. On my side, the everything looks all right. So we'll see if something emerges with an audio problem. In any case, it's something I have. I'm going to change the subject if you don't mind. Oh, okay,
sure.
Maybe my side. Oh, okay. Okay, thanks, man. Well, thanks for mentioning the audio problem. That actually means, even though it turned out not to be real, that means a lot to me because I've done whole shows where the audio was all fucked up and nobody said anything. What was that? Oh, yeah. I've started using phentermine ever since you gave me an Adderall.
Yeah. Oh gosh. Okay.
And I couldn't get Adderall, but I could get phentermine, which is similar, and it is a diet appetite suppressant, which is why I've got access to it. And I found, just like Adderall, like I was like, man, this stuff, it's weird. It's not that it's fun. It's not particularly fun, but it helps you get your day. It's like liquid enthusiasm for life, sort of.
Huh.
I just find it's
stimulant.
it's not easier to focus, but it's easier to be enthusiastic about doing the stuff that you need to do, and to do it like aggressively, and to focus on it, and to do it as well as you can, rather than your mind kind of wandering or wanting to do something else. And then it also is great for as an appetite suppressant. And so I have actually been losing weight too. Now I do it about twice a week. I wanted to tell this story. I've been doing this for a month or two. And I noticed that it was so useful that I was starting to want to like if I have to do anything today, I'm gonna take some phentermine, right? Because I know it'll help. And then I was immediately like, man, that just doesn't sound. It's not addiction like it feels
Dependence
good.
is the word.
Dependence is the word, exactly. And so the other week I was like, there was a day that I wanted to do it, and I was like, yeah, but you've already done it twice this week, dude. And so I didn't do it because I was like, no, I can't. What I'm finding is that you integrate a new substance, and that fighting dependence or fighting addiction is easy at first. So as long as you notice your habits forming right away, you can compensate for that, right? And you'll be successful, or at least I'll be successful with being. But if, on the other hand, if you do develop some bad habits, then they're hard to break.
Yeah, it's probably where it gets the worst, because you didn't have that thought of, let's figure out a better way. So now you have to get past this chemical
wiring to get back to that voice.
Yeah, and then you just have to make rules for yourself and not break them. So with that stuff, I have rules about both dosage and frequency. And ever since I realized it was something that I had to watch out for, it hasn't been a problem. I did the same thing with ketamine, actually. Well, a year ago, I loved ketamine so much. As soon as I tried it, it was like, oh man, this is both psychedelic and super fun, and you sober up in an hour. And then I was doing it like every week or something for a while, and I realized that ketamine uniquely might be potentially addictive amongst psychedelics, right? Psychedelics generally, you just don't have to think about that kind of thing at all, doing it too much, or at least not me. But with ketamine, It was like, oh, you know what? I need to watch out for this. And immediately, as soon as I noticed the problem, I shifted. My behavior shifted. I started doing it maybe every couple of months. And ever since I noticed it and made that rule, it hasn't been a problem at all.
Oh, ketamine every couple months. And then I may have missed something. And why did you get to that point where you were kind of creating that structure for yourself?
Because I read that people have addiction problems with ketamine, and that I noticed that I liked it enough that I was taking it every couple weeks, which seemed like a lot.
Oh, yeah.
Especially since it does have some load on your body. It will actually, your what is it? Your kidneys or your like.
Oh yeah.
Like it can actually be bad for you. So that's not something. Overdoing that is not something you want to get into.
Yeah, that's well. Anyway, the discerning listener will deduce a lot of info from that, but that's saying a lot, right? That's saying that you're recognizing potential, and I did too when I took my Adderall, which I've only done it once so far, but I thought, oh, I could get really into this stuff, and so I immediately kind of downgraded it, and also it wasn't the effect. Anyway, there's a lot of reasons, but I get from what you're saying an awareness that you like it too much, or that somehow you're just starting to default, an awareness that you want to change that pattern, right? An awareness of how to change that pattern by saying, okay, here's the structure, and then anyway, it's just the way your mind is working in that moment. I think is a good illustration for how people might follow suit. Instead of saying, ooh, I want more of that, you think, oh, do I want more of that? Is that a good way to be? You think about your own actions, but there's some kind of self-reference there that seems to be a way to break addiction, or indeed is the very thing we are looking for in the first place, which means that we don't need the chemical because we're doing it directly by self-referencing or self-reflecting, or I do think that's a lot of what drugs give us. It's just self-relationship in all these different ways. And once you have it, you can direct your own cognitive functions or your own psycho-emotional state more choicefully. And I know, Chris, for you, that word choice is like a real word when it comes to talking about addiction and whatnot. So anyway, I kind of wanted to break that out because I thought that was important, what you were saying.
Yeah, I get that. Yeah, so I'm on a little phentermine today. I just got so much to do. It seems like cheating, but I don't think it's actually unhealthy. It's weird.
So tell me, I don't know that. It's well, this is not always your world, but phentermine is basically a kind of amphetamine stimulant, or what's going on there? What is it?
I mean, it's just a little bit different than Adderall.
Yeah.
Chemically. I couldn't tell you exactly. I don't remember what. But
it feels similar, you're saying.
Yes, it's actually pretty subtle, especially right now. I'm just on a normal dose of 37.5 milligrams, which is for appetite suppression. So as far as feeling it consciously, it's quite subtle at that dose. Okay. And the most I've ever taken was 1.5, which will be more like Adderall.
I see. Interesting. Phentermine. Okay, cool. All right. Well, we're kind of adding a new compound. Last week we added nitrous, so we're adding a new compound.
Yeah.
I'll do a little research while we're talking.
Yeah. Actually, I was thinking about you came up with that like protocol of using neurological precursors or whatever they're called, like supplements in sort of an upper kind of way, right? Remember that?
Wait. Oh yeah. Right. Yeah, I still do. Right. I've kind of. Yes.
Yeah, I was thinking about maybe let's not talk about it here really, because we already did a whole episode about that.
Sure.
But I might want to try that stuff. Somebody, our main person we're talking to this time mostly is Preston Bobby, and he was wondering, did we talk about mescaline?
Yeah, probably after that Oregon trip. We could talk more about it, sure. Yeah, well, just to dive in, one of the most notable things I thought, or two very notable things, mescaline and 2CB are similar to a dopamine molecule, and most of the other psychedelics, classic psychedelics, are shaped more like a serotonin molecule. And if you know anything about those neurotransmitters, serotonin is more of like relaxing, connecting, grounding. Dopamine is more action and reward, excitement. And to me, while they both felt it's like a psychedelic, they behave differently. Like for me on LSD, like using technology or reading a map is really, really, really hard and kind of pointless. It just looks like this weird human thing. But on mescaline and 2CB, I didn't have trouble with it at all. And I've heard other people say that too. They can have a conversation, they can eat a meal, you can like function kind of in your body. So that was one, you don't get couch lock like you do with mushrooms, at least for me. So that's one thing. Also with mescaline, it takes, 3 hours to peak, maybe more. So because it's so gradual, it just, the sense of reality, what's reality, is a very different kind of consideration, because it's not like sober and then, oh my God, I'm so fucking high. It's so gradual, you kind of forget where the line is. So anyway, that's, what about you? That's kind of what I was left with after I think it's
the mescaline.
I think it's the best.
Do you really?
Oh yeah, mescaline. I mean,
think it's the
obviously,
best.
if you're talking practicalities, then that's not really. But if you had all day to do something, I think that would always be my choice. It's just, yeah. I mean, again, I've only done it once, and we took 420 milligrams, and I think 600 milligrams is kind of threshold for like a real hallucination realm.
How many milligrams?
600 to 800 is like the hallucination territory, and then under 6 is, whatever, however you divide it. So, it was kind of an introductory dose, and I'm sure things can get really hairy, but I found it to be kind of gentle and, potent, obviously. Anyway, but what do you remember about it?
It was mild. If I did it again, I'd want to take it a little bit more.
Oh yes, totally. Yeah, agreed.
But I certainly liked it. What if, in a way, I was a little disappointed. We tried a whole bunch of different serotonin-oriented, not necessarily tryptamines, but serotonin-oriented psychedelics, right? The 2CB, right?
Sure.
Was the other one we tried, and they were definitely different than mushrooms, acid, but kind of not that different for me. They were different. They were definitely different, but they were more functional, definitely, both of them. But also the patterns I saw, and the way my body felt, and the kinds of thoughts that came to my mind were pretty similar. I did like the slow come up though. It's really interesting. Mescaline takes what, 3 hours before you peak?
Yeah, it's kind of, I felt like it, yeah. It's
Right.
a long time.
And
And the
then just-
come down is very also super gradual.
It's like the opposite of DMT or salvia. The shape of the mountain, that is.
Yeah. There's nothing like it. I mean, what's the longest any other drug takes to come on? An hour, maybe? 45 minutes? I mean,
Yeah.
they're all kind of similar.
Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, usually it would be at most like an hour or hour and a half for mushrooms acid. Mushrooms especially,
Yeah.
right? Raw mushrooms probably the longest, but hour and a half at the most.
Yeah.
So it's nice. And then the come down is real slow too. So it's very, very gentle. Easy to think, easy to function. It's really nice. I forget. Somebody's asking about Amanita. Well, I mean, we could talk about it. Why not? You've done that, right? I have not.
No, I did a micro. I can't say that I had the experience. No, I am prepared to have one, but I have, what's interesting, right? Each psychedelic, well, a lot of psychedelics are psychedelic at the serotonin receptor. And, you know, there's different, ketamine is psychedelic at the NMDA receptor, and salvia is psychedelic at the kappa opioid receptor, and amanita is psychedelic at the GABA receptor, and the GABA system is a sedative system. That's what like Valium and Xanax, that's how they work. They chill you out. So
I didn't know that.
I'm curious about it.
That's the GABA is the same as both alcohol and kava, I believe.
Alcohol and kava are at which one? GABA?
GABA, I think, but in totally different
Yeah.
ways. It's over my head,
that makes sense.
but they relate. They do use that receptor, but in like almost opposite ways from what I've read.
Yeah. So yeah, it's that's why they're different.
That's why they're different.
That's also why at some point, that's also why I'm kind of, I get excited about these, well, they're called phenethylamines, are the, right, tryptamines, mushroom, well, acid's kind of unique, but mushrooms, DMT, those are tryptamines, and those are based on a serotonin molecule, so I get excited about
things that are different.
Because a lot of the common drugs are kind of similar in their function and their molecular structure. I did actually learn, this is I guess just for the chemist, I'm not really much of a chemist, but I find that it informs my relationship to them. Psilocybin, bufotenine, which people call bufo, are almost the same exact molecule. It has all the same atoms, but one of the groups is just on a different place on the ring than the other. But it has a really different effect. It's 4-HO DMT, I think, is and 5-HO. Anyway, can't remember the chemical names, but a lot of these chemicals are really, really similar.
Right. Yes.
So. And of course, then there's all those novel compounds like Foxy and Moxy, DIPT, and whatever. I mean, so many of them.
Yeah. Well, once you open the box of these psychoactives, you realize how many there actually are, and a lot of them are actually legal. I met I met somebody the other day, like a serious guy. I forget his name, but he lives in Portland. He runs a storefront bookstore, I think, that raises money for people to get psychedelic treatment, something like that.
Wow,
He's all
cool.
in, and he writes books about psychedelics. His name is Thomas, I think, and we were going to hook up, but we haven't yet. Anyway, his specialty, his thing is nightshades.
Oh, wow. Are you kidding? Holy
No,
shit.
I'm not fucking with you.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's heavy, man. Yeah, nightshades are no joke. Yeah, scopolamine. I don't know. I might try that someday, but I don't. So every every experience I hear, it always sounds like, yeah, that sounds like not fun at all.
So that is, let's see, a nightshade. That's more than one thing, right? Like there is different.
Yeah. There's a couple nightshades.
Just
Tomatoes,
like what
potatoes.
the old witches would use in the New World, right?
Yeah, and then let me look it up. There's nightshades, and then
Is Datura in that camp?
yeah, I was gonna. No, I think it's. Oh, yeah, Datura is a nightshade, but then let's see.
Oh, somebody said, Sibo said, I think he is talking about the nightshades. Scopolamine and atropine.
Oh yes.
Have you heard of those?
Yeah, right. Yeah, those are the chemicals that get you high in nightshades. But it affects your autonomic nervous system. So if you take too much, you stop breathing, and you don't have any muscle control. It's really getting to the it's really hacking the CPU, if you will, of your physiology, the shit that keeps you alive. That's what you're fucking with those drugs.
Yeah.
you can
best
overdose.
You got to really, really be, your harm reduction has to be times 1,000 at best.
Yeah.
Preston, who's been sweet and has said a lot of things, did ask several times about the K opioid. It's a kind of a basic question in the salvia world, but we can give it a sec anyway because it's not complicated. So there's more than one opioid receptor, and let's see. There's a mu, I want to say. I don't quite remember. I think there's 3 opioid receptors. Generally speaking, dopamine, opioid is it's several things. Pleasure, yeah, but especially the one that's important is desire. So if we're talking about drug use, realizing that that dopamine relates to desire is important because that is the trigger of addiction. The K opioid receptor doesn't have anything to do with that. It doesn't ramp up desire. In fact, if anything, there is speculation. It's the science is new, but the idea is that the K opioid might actually be brakes on put the brakes on your desire. So there's a lot of research right now on using salvia to help people with addiction. And what's interesting is that salvia divinorum, I believe, is essentially the only psychedelic, or the only, well, not the only substance, but the only substance in the psychedelic world that utilizes the K opioid receptors. So it's got these it's uniquely anti-addictive. Salvia is not addictive. And also the experience is radically, radically different than anything else.
Salvia,
totally.
Yeah, I will default to you, but I find, maybe I just need more sessions with Chris Mandel, but I find salvia to be every drug has a unique effect. And I could kind of argue that you could pick out some of them if I didn't know which one I'd taken. And salvia is similarly unique, but it's almost like the effect is so unique that it overrides any attempt to do anything at all. Like it's gonna take you on a ride and tell you what's up, and then that's it. like it's almost like intentions don't work, but I'm not saying this is how it is. I just keep having this experience that no matter what I bring to it, it always does exactly the same thing, kinda. Does that sound like bullshit?
It always does the same thing? Is that what you mean?
Well, I mean, I'm kind of saying a number of things. It's so singular in what it does. The experience is so unique that it's almost like no matter what intention I bring to it, it just kind of has a similar effect. Does that make sense?
I don't know. I think it's hard for me to answer that.
Basically, you feel like it's a flexible and like you can work with it in lots of different ways, or I mean, I might argue that DMT is similar. Like it's so intense and so singular, it just knocks you out. Ketamine, I suppose, is like that, but I find that there's lots of different content. I don't find a lot of content in salvia, I guess.
Well, if you take more, you'll get hallucinations and stuff. But I find insights. Just today, I get like it's like just nothing. Getting a little piece of wisdom out of salvia is for me. It's like it's just there. I don't even necessarily have to ask the questions. Like today, I was I smoked some salvia before this because I was like not in the mood, kind of just overwhelmed by life, and all I asked for was relaxation so that I could do the session, which I got, but the message that I received was deeper than that. It was, the message was the role that you've created for your life, or the things that you have to do, like doing this live stream, for example, are only tiring and overwhelming if you're resisting them. And in reality, the moment that you just accept that this is the life that you've given for yourself and just accept doing it and dive all the way in, it's no longer tiring. I mean, you literally might not have time for it. That's a different issue. But as far as like lacking enthusiasm or just being like, I don't know, groggy, that is resistance to the life that you have been handed. And if you don't resist it, that fatigue will immediately disappear. Was what I learned today.
Yeah, I think that I love that. I mean, that's so indicative of what. Oh well, let's see. That's so indicative of the realm that psychedelics define, right? It might tell you like it has. Go stand up and find your cat, do something practical, but it might also say, and usually says, well, the experience you're having is something you're creating inside you, so you need to change that, and then you're going to have a different experience. It doesn't mean go drink more coffee. It means don't resist. It's an internal thing.
Yeah.
Which just says a lot. So if, for somebody whose metaphysical frame of reference is, as people, we're basically just hard impenetrable balls, like, science used to believe about matter, bouncing off things in the world, and the only place to make change is between us and other physical things, then there's this whole other reality that's accessible to us, whereby there's a whole world inside us that's infinitely big, and the number of different things you can experience or create or achieve in there is limitless. And of course, you need the external world too. But anyway, I love that reminder.
Yeah. And what can I say on salvia? That kind of stuff, just I don't know. It's just always there. But it's my ally. I was introduced to this term. I don't know if you know it. Is your ally? meaning
Yeah.
that you might have more than one ally, but those like substances that are like your baby, you've got a special
Yeah.
connection, and
Sure.
you can accept that other people maybe don't have that connection.
Yeah.
And DMT is fine, but it is not my ally. I
Oh, yeah.
know numerous people who have a much closer, more meaningful relationship with DMT than me.
Yeah, no, cannabis is definitely my ally. Salvia seems to be yours.
And then what's interesting is you've also really fallen in love with one thing is there's two new ones, 2CB and mescaline, but you've only done each one twice. I've done mescaline once and 2CB twice. So we've got sort of new new friends.
I mean, yeah, I think I'm excited about those because they have a different function, but I'd say in the realm of ally, I mean, it would be the answer is obvious, but which ones, have we done the most, know most about, it's most productive or flexible in its use. Whatever you're trying to get out of it, you can use it for lots of different. I would say that being able to use something for lots of different purposes indicates that you're using it perhaps in the right way.
Yeah, and you've really developed a tool set.
Yeah, you've really developed a tool set, and you're not having a repetitive experience, which means you're in it for insight and growth and change and exploration and creativity. You're looking for content. You're looking for material.
Could I not change, but bend that topic to something?
Yeah.
Let's take an example. You could say, if you want a specific example like cannabis, somebody asks, just God is in our name, but we don't always we tend to talk about drugs a lot. And then I'm playing music, so we don't have to talk about music. And then spirituality, I think both of us are so into spirituality, we take it for granted and don't talk about it very much explicitly. So I'm wondering about, let's say you can change the example if you want, but I'll give you the example of cannabis and how that relates specifically to your spiritual life. You could even get into the stuff that you've done at House of Hope if you want.
Oh, sure. Oh, how it does. Oh, spiritually.
How's it relevant?
Right. Yeah. That's why I kind of brought up that it's not just your destiny to run a church, but you have specific religious and spiritual experiences that are your credentials. Cannabis and spirituality. Is this your question, or was somebody asking?
Well, it came from somebody. Somebody just said, what's the connection between psychedelics and God? And I thought, we haven't talked. It made me think everything I just said, that we take spirituality for granted and don't always talk about it explicitly.
Yeah, well, that's, let's see. I was looking for the answer that gives the most information, although Chris usually needs to summarize for me. So,
yeah, I guess that is sort of our, it's sort of our process.
Well, let's see. I guess there's psychedelics and spirituality, or God.
Ooh.
I would define. Let's define our terms. To me, God would be a word used to describe some kind of experience of force that seems, fundamental or overarching. Right? Like, why does matter vibrate? Why do atoms vibrate? Why don't they slow down and stop? Well, not going to say God, because then I'd be accused of the God of the gaps argument. But we don't know why, right? We don't know why there's something rather than nothing, and why we don't know why the universe came into form, or why, even if it came into form through natural cause, why that cause was happening in the first place. We don't know why atoms spin and they don't stop, why energy can be. We don't know these things. We know how things work sometimes. We don't really know what it is, because you can't. The deeper you dig, the more it just becomes more stuff, more particles and more waves, and you have to dig into those, and it just doesn't end. So that's a scientific kind of version of God, or it could be religious, but somehow your questions are aiming to know or to connect with something more fundamental than individual things, right? What lies at the foundation of existence, or what is, the entirety of the universe, right? Why does it exist? Where did it come from? Did God make it? Did science, did it explode? Those kind of questions. Then they merge. That, to me, is the realm. Or it could be a personal God. It could be lots of things, but the mystical God, I think, is more the nature of reality. But then there's a personal God. I guess there's lots of kinds of God. Let's just those two for simplicity. Well, I would say psychedelics don't do anything. They only do what that's not true. Psychedelics do things intrinsically, but if you bring to it content, it's going to work with that. So if you're using them to seek these questions, you're going to have experiences that are profound, that are, overarching or fundamental. It's going to magnify where your mind is at. And now you have, a medicine that's providing more input on these considerations than you ordinarily have, because now your brain's working different. So that would be my, connecting the two. Cannabis is unique for me. I don't actually know what receptor site it works at. I guess I should. I think it does a lot of things. But I find that maybe it's like the psychedelic version of phentermine. It's really flexible. I can do anything with it. Right? It just gives me this kind of enhanced whatever, but I'm still me. I'm not self-transcending. So, cannabis is, it's like I don't actually mean this. I just think it's funny. It's like the thinking man's coffee, right? It's like
cannabis.
It just makes you better at being you. You could do anything with it, but it also specifically.
That sounds like phentermine.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
Dude, a combination. I've done it once and I loved it. Was just the phentermine in 5 at most milligrams of weed on top, 2.5 milligrams of weed, just enough to feel.
Oh yeah.
It's a little kind of reminiscent of Molly in a way.
I bet. No, it is actually, in fact, because those compounds are related, MDMA and amphetamines. They're similar.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's kind of like that, except because cannabis is kind of psychedelic, then it's putting you in a state of being more contemplative. Kind of the stereotypes, right? Like you zone out, you stare at things, you forget time, you forget what you're talking about. If you're actually using that as a skill, then you can really focus on things and have deeper experience or insight into things, because it really allows you to focus, and it kind of tunes out everything else it kind of creates cognitive tunnel vision, I guess. So if you're practicing, and you need to sit there for an hour, it's really useful, because you get super into how your fingers are moving, and how this, the subtle changes in the scale, practicing scales or whatever. So that's the twist, I'd say. It kind of does everything better, but it then, doesn't do everything better, because it's changing you so that you can only do a subset of what you could do before, but you're better at it. And
interesting.
That's
a good way of thinking of it.
Yeah. It's probably why you're doing it anyway. It's because you're not. Fine, if you want to smoke some weed and go to work, then more power to you. But Yeah, does it making you better at linear things at your job with coworkers? Maybe if you love your job, but probably not if you don't like your job so much. Yeah, and that, I'm being kind of general, but that means anything. That really applies to anything. Chris mentioned House of Hope, which I guess is my version. I've been a pianist.
Well, yeah, I was wondering about like more specific applications. So go ahead about House of Hope.
Well, I would say the main one is, and this. I mean, I'll admit.
Oh, by the way, Jeremy, is it by design that your camera's off?
Oh no, it's not. I mean, I don't think there's much to see, but.
Well, I mean, no, that is a better shot than just nothing.
Okay. Oh. What was I gonna say? Specific. Oh yeah. It's kind of I'll just say it's my thing, right? Smoke a little weed and go take a walk for like 3 hours. But I always am prepared because I'm always bringing to it some content. Like yesterday. I mean, it could be anything. I've done this thousands of times. But I'm selling a house. So yesterday I was like, okay, I'm going to go walking. And my question is, how am I going to sell this fucking house? So I'm kind of like you did today with Salvia. You sat down and you said, you had a question, you got an answer. Well, of course, I got 2 answers. The majority of the answer was what I need to do internally to align myself with this unfolding process, which might mean that I think more practical ideas more easily, or that on some, energetic, metaphysical level, I'm facilitating the sale because I'm ready to let go of the house or some such thing. And I got some specific kind of first thought was we need to do more open houses. So that was, 2 minutes in, and then most of the rest of it was, so that's a specific thing. Doesn't have to be questions, right? I could get really into my music making, into my piano playing. I can get into trance states or flow states more. I guess it's both. I would say cannabis is the best thing to get into trance and flow states. It specifically creates a trancey state, and then you can kind of morph it. Which I would say a flow state is if you're moving, if you're in a trance but you're moving, you're playing the piano, you're running, you're driving for a long time. What they call it, road trance or something like that. I don't
know that term, but I know what you're talking about.
Yeah. Anyway, flow state. And the trance state is if you're sitting, if you're not physically moving your body, then you're in a trance because you feel heavy, right? Your body's kind of buzzing. It's kind of feels, I don't know, like solid, or you're in a bag of sand. There's a certain sensation. Flow has a different kind of sensation. So I would say that cannabis induces that state, and then you can kind of turn it into anything. I don't know. How am I doing? Is that a good answer? Or I could be more specific. I just kind of lost track of.
Oh, actually, I lost track a little bit too. So, do you use cannabis in church to help you get into a flow state?
Yeah, I don't think anyone will ever be watching this show.
I think you'll be safe.
I think, I do. So and to Chris's point about his early upbringing. I was raised Jewish, and it's really different than other religions because of the cultural aspect of it can sometimes, which Christianity has too, but the genetic cultural heritage aspect of Judaism makes it such that sometimes the religiosity is really not the focus. It's almost like you're just celebrating your own tradition, whereas I find Christianity to be a lot about real studying the Bible and really about the Bible. Judaism, at least how I was raised, was not. So yeah, there's no conflict for me between drugs and religion and spirituality. In fact, that was what really amplified my experience of spirit and then really got me to start studying religion in a new way. Christianity, on the other hand, they're very clear on what you should and shouldn't do. And so yeah, I'm in a church. I play piano in a church, and it's a very, like, I love the place. Real living gospel tradition, real deal. And I use it there kind of for a number of reasons, right? I find that I'm, especially when I'm in an environment that I'm not a total match for, which is totally this place. Which is to say, I'm not like really a Christian. I'm not really there to want to learn about the Bible. I'm there to have a certain kind of experience. But the experience is a combination of the music making and the kind of internal states that I can cultivate, basically, is what it is. And I can, when I smoke cannabis before I play the service, I can kind of amplify all that. And it also gives me a feeling that I can choose whether I'm like in my own bubble, whether I'm like really inside my own experience, or if I want to connect with the whole congregation, I can choose like how much of each to do. Because I find that if I'm there and I'm having to like be part of the group and listen to the stuff, I'm bored like within 30 seconds. I can't stand it. But if I'm in my own internal world and I'm there for my own reasons, and it can be really creative with the outcome that I'm there to achieve, then the sky's the limit on the experience that I can have. So I'm in that way, I tend to not be much of a group participant, because it always feels just off topic for what I'm there to do in that particular moment, which has its drawbacks. But if I'm in control, then it's also can be really useful kind of approach. But I could easily see, and I've had this experience here and there, that I had smoked, but now my mind was too creative and it was hard to focus on something. It was like there just to be focused on. Right? So I could see that the reverse could happen. If you really are getting the experience by singing with everybody and being with everybody, and you just need to be part of it, you need to almost downgrade your personal content. Which in a way trance does and flow does, but it leaves you inside yourself, even though your own ego is being downgraded. But still you're inside yourself. It's harder anytime, kind of almost argue with anything, including coffee. Anytime you're heightening your internal experience, you're becoming more self-referencing, and so you're not totally in connection with your external environment, in a way that's, well, in the same way. And if it's strong enough internal experience, it can be really hard to focus on external things, because compared to your own mind, the external things are very slow moving and very well defined, and and sometimes it's important. It's like a meditation object. You just want one object. You don't want that object to be turning into 1,000 things, because you can't meditate on it anymore. So I guess that would be the drawback. But anyway, that's not usually what I'm trying to do. Meditating, I wouldn't smoke and meditate. Not for a focused meditation. I would do it for like a self-transcendent meditation. But if I was trying to stare at a spot on the wall, or really get my mind quiet.
I agree. Weed's not good for that.
No, it's too much going on. Yeah, I don't think any chemical is that good for that.
You know what I'll say.
Well, only
there's one exception.
I'll preface that only to say that if you're trying to, there's all these different. The brain can do all sorts of things, right? So there's all these different states of consciousness. one state is when your sense of identity kind of merges with your sense of what the world is, and then they become non-different. Now, there's something unique about that happening in a sober state, because if you've changed your internal state, then by definition, you're reinterpreting the external environment, which is often the goal. But it still means that you're not in connection with your normative interpretation of reality, which again, there's no hierarchy, but to be able to melt into normative reality, I think has a special place in the hierarchy of spiritual disciplines. There's a different kind of calmness, or there's a different quality to it that I think is important. I mean, I would say the same thing about dreaming, right? I mean, if you're falling asleep and you can lucid dream or whatever, yeah, it's a very unique context that has its own value. So I'm not saying that one is better than the other. I'm just pointing out that they all have their uses. Anyway, so that's. But yeah, for you, that one exception seems to be quite flexible for lots of these different domains. Is that what you're getting at?
We're talking about salvia.
Yeah. Oh, I know.
Yeah, I know. Well, not everybody necessarily. All of my point was that salvia meditation. Yeah, you smoke salvia, and then you're kind of just tripping at first, but then you come down into a deep meditative state.
Oh yes. Okay. That's different, I think, because which actually it's kind of makes me think that the come down are really, we've talked about it before, that's a real part of the trip. But for you, the come down salvia is almost like meditative sobriety or something. Is that true? Like if you're no longer tripping, it's just like it like goes right into almost like a deep sober meditation.
Yeah, you could say that. Or the line between sober and not and still on the salvia kind of ceases to mean very much. Because I don't exactly come down until I open my eyes. But that's because I'm meditating.
Right. And you're no longer being moved by internally by that chemical. Your experience is more stable, I guess.
Yeah, that's true. But it's still the salvia helped me get there.
Yeah, sure, totally.
And also, even while peaking on salvia, it might just be kind of weird and chaotic, but to tell you the truth, not really. It's mostly pretty focused.
Yeah. Right. I guess I would say the same thing about cannabis. I guess in a way I'm kind of playing devil's advocate. I'm just acknowledging that there's a non-ordinary reality being cultivated and related to, which by its nature is different from the ordinary one, or the ordinary experience or framework, or however you define it. But which is to say that then there's good questions to ask about, well, how can one relate to ordinary reality in a way that mimics a chemically induced approach, right? And that would be, there's lots of answers: meditation and creativity and being in nature, and how can you? There was a group. Anyway, there's a group I knew of. They call themselves Natural Highs. So they were studying all this stuff, mate circles and dream interpretation. How can you engage with the ordinary experience? I guess that's fair. We don't know what reality is, but we could say our ordinary experience. How can you engage that in a way that is multidimensional, is transcendent of normal causation. At least in your interpretation or your philosophy of it, like the house stuff, or like your answer. I mean, those were chemically induced, but you carry those interpretations with you. That like,
Right.
Oh, okay, instead of telling that person to fuck off because they're being a dick, maybe you were first being a dick, and then they reacted to you, so you need to chill out, right? I mean, all of a sudden, that's a simple like psychology, right? I mean, that's philosophy. These are ways of digging into ordinary experience and coming up with non-ordinary results, I guess you could say. So I guess somehow that got included as that's an important context, because it's not just the drugs, or it's not just the states they induce. It's actually the capacity for the brain to have these states, and can you induce them in other ways? I don't know. Seems like a good question. I'm talking a lot.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, we also have this conversation in our thread that I'm not even engaging in, shrooms versus salvia. Oh, it's good. People can talk. Hayes is here, by the way. Did I mention that?
Oh, what's up, Hayes?
Yeah, we need to have him back on the show sometime. Actually, it occurred to me if we do this over Zoom and we have a address that is fairly stable.
Oh yeah.
And at some points we could just invite people, like if Hayes is there and he happens to have the address. I mean, we're kind of at the end of the show today, so I don't think it's great, but a good week for that. But I actually wouldn't mind if people we know who have the address just joined us. Yeah. That might be kind of fun to have it a little open like that.
Yeah, I guess if people haven't picked up on it, something that we don't maybe say explicitly, but is implied in this entire show and our entire worldview, is that there's this kind of like internested set of conditions that define the metaphysics Chris and I use, which means that obviously there's plant medicine, but we wouldn't use that if there weren't other states that we thought were valuable. And those states wouldn't be valuable if they didn't have certain creative results. And those results wouldn't be creative or insightful if creativity and insight wasn't always a thing. And so creativity and insight all the time is something to strive for, which then means, what's the tools of creativity, insight? Well, artistic discipline and creative thinking and philosophy and psychology and asking questions and generally being curious. It starts there, right? So, and then once you start asking questions and you create worldviews, and those worldviews reflect this kind of multidimensionality. That's probably why we get off topic sometimes, because once you talk about one thing, you just end up talking about everything. It's all connected. They're all different expressions of each other. One might ask, well, I would say curiosity. I would also say suffering. Those might be the two most fundamental motivators to do anything that's not normal. To ask questions that aren't normal, to seek experiences that aren't normal. Certainly if you're suffering, you want to feel better, and you start asking why, Or if you're curious, you start trying to probe beneath normal stuff, because, all right, you did what you were supposed to, it was fun for like 5 minutes, and now it's just repetitive, so what else is there to do? You could build kind of a feedback loop of all these different domains, because they all define each other. At the end of the day, being curious, wanting to become better, whatever that means for you, wanting to understand your own potential, especially if you don't feel like things are optimal in your life, then you're kind of curious, but you're curious to do something better because you kind of feel that it's lacking. So I don't know. That's there's a real. Maybe one day we'll co-write a book, but there's a real kind of, multi-layered, I don't know, system, I guess, in place. And these medicines are simply a tool after many, many layers of other things that are, that are there, right? So now we just have it's kind of like Trillium, right? We could never have done Trillium until we became the kind of people that are able to do it and cultivated all the different parts of ourselves, or, got ourselves into an economic space and, found our calling, so we made money or whatever, healed so that we had the bandwidth to go through all these other, you know what I mean? Once you become the potential of who you are, now you're not trying to address the unknown in the same way, or you're not trying to fix yourself, or you're not trying to heal in the same way. Now you're just living according to your truth, and now it's, well, hopefully more fun or more helpful for people, or more something. So yeah, this is the background that we don't often talk about. It's not just the spirituality, it's why did we choose spirituality in the first place? Well, there's lots of steps before that, but they all matter because that's kind of the path. It's a path, really. Whatever you might call it, path of consciousness, or the path of, I don't know, something like that.
And it's just kind of, like I mentioned that I spent a couple hours, I think, just kind of going through my life and looking at the patterns and how I got to where I am. And frankly, there's a lot of stuff that's kind of like, yes, there's personality involved and decisions that I made, but also like a lot of circumstance involved. And also oftentimes like pain or disappointment that you end up running your life and trying to compensate for or figure out how. I think that going into spirituality early on had something to do with having problems manifesting more obvious physical things in my life. So I was sort of driven internally, and then got better at that. And then manifesting more physically, in my life has been more recent as far as having any success at all, including musically, actually.
You mean that because you were spiritually focused, it kind of took your attention, and it was harder to give attention to doing like normal things like career and buying shit and all that stuff?
Yes, there's that, but there's also just like even before then, as a kid, not being successful in those kinds of areas, and then sort of gravitating towards a more internal life.
Yes.
Because you're not being very successful in the conventional ways. Right? You're like not a football star, and you're not dating a cheerleader.
Interesting. It's almost like you keep, this kind of is a nod towards the nature of reality, but if one way of looking at things doesn't work, then you find one that does, that somehow seems to influence the unfolding of events in your life, and what you can have control over. Because I was like that too. Like I'm not like super social or like good at it. I'm not like very business oriented. I've made like okay money based on my skills, but I wasn't out to start any big like business endeavor. I was always more interested in the internal world, and it felt like I could affect more change there. It could be argued that anything you experience is your own experience, and so if you can construct it, then you can have any experience you want. Therefore, reality is anything you want it to be. It doesn't always work out that cleanly, but That's kind of what we're getting to, I think. Yeah, you find an orientation that you feel like you can control.
Sorry, I am answering a little question.
I will say, just since you're doing that, I spent a little time formulating a system that maybe we can talk about next time. And Chris, I know you're busy, but maybe you can kind of skim over. I'll send you some materials and you can skim over.
Sure. You want to just get? Why? Maybe we should, with that, start wrapping up. And so, let's make that what we'll talk about next week, and you can give a little 1 minute synopsis of what you're talking about.
Oh, a synopsis right now?
Yeah.
Oh, okay, sure. Well, it's kind of been long in coming, but I want to list each chemical. I want to list all the characteristics of, Wikipedia does it, or PsychoWiki does a good job. Anyway, I want to list a number of phenomenological characteristics of each one in order of strongest to weakest, whether it's, kind of how they work in the body. And then I want to list different uses for each one and how to best use them, like kind of instructions on how to use them in that way. And then finally list questions one might have to tap into that use. So, if we decide that MDMA is really good for interpersonal healing, then we want to say, well, now how do you use that for healing? And then finally, what's a good goal or question you can bring to it to create a healing experience? So kind of this whole, we'll have a name for it, I suppose, but it's kind of this whole framework of real multi-level integration and like a design, almost like what do you call it? Concordance, right? Like you have a system that tells you, okay, if you're trying to achieve this particular thing, use this thing in this way. Or if you're using this thing, here's the different ways you can use it and the different results you might get. So you can kind of go different directions.
That's perfect.
So, great. All right. Well, this has been...
Actually, instead of typing... Somebody, while that was perfect, but I'm going to kill the music and make it official that we're wrapping up the show. Somebody asked about my Discord. I know this is a totally different topic. Why don't I have a Discord? Most of my work right now is local, and it's through Meetup, and I am trying to avoid having two different things, Cloudless Rain and then the Plant Medicine Explorers, but because it's hard to support two different things. So I don't exactly know what I'm going to do. But you can always reach out to me through my website, and then somehow I need to figure out what I'm going to do for an online community. That's a terrible answer. But that is the answer right now. And I think with that, we are going to call it a week. And we are looking forward to Jeremy's concordance.
All right, there we go. Drug concordance.
All right, I'm going to end this, guys, and we will see you or not or whatever next week. Probably Wednesday, right?
Yeah, I think we're sticking to Wednesday. Here, that's what it'll look like.
Yeah. Okay. Bye-bye.
All right. Bye. Are we done?
Yes, we are done.
So are you down?